The warship drifted silently through deep space, its black metal surface shining under distant stars. Inside the central command chamber, rows of armored alien soldiers stood perfectly still, their glowing eyes fixed on the large metal doors at the end of the hall. Everyone in the room knew something unusual was about to happen. A prisoner from Earth was being brought inside. Humans were a new species to the galaxy, small, fragile, and often underestimated. Most alien officers believed humans were weak and easy to control. But the woman standing at the center of the chamber was not like most officers. Commander Lyra had defeated entire fleets and conquered worlds without mercy. Her silver armor reflected the blue lights of the chamber, and her calm face showed no emotion at all. When she entered a battlefield, even experienced warriors felt fear. The heavy doors slowly opened with a deep metallic sound. Two alien guards dragged a human man into the chamber. His hands were locked in energy restraints, and his clothes were torn from earlier fighting. His name was Daniel Carter, a simple human pilot who had been captured after a small ship was destroyed near the edge of alien territory. He looked tired, but his eyes were still alert as he glanced around the massive room, filled with tall alien soldiers. The guards forced him to kneel in front of Commander Lyra, expecting him to beg or show fear like most prisoners did, but Daniel remained silent, breathing slowly while he studied the strange commander standing before him. Whispers moved quietly through the soldiers standing along the walls. Many of them expected Lyra to end the human's life immediately. After all, prisoners rarely survived long in her presence. The Empire was preparing for a possible war with Earth, and showing mercy to a human made no sense to most officers. But Lyra did not move. She simply watched Daniel for several long seconds. Her glowing eyes focused on him, as if she was trying to understand something hidden beneath his calm face. The room became so quiet that even the low hum of the warship engines could be heard. Finally, Lyra spoke, her voice calm but powerful. "Human, look at me," she said slowly. Daniel lifted his head and met her gaze directly. A few soldiers shifted in surprise, because most prisoners avoided eye contact with the commander, but Daniel did not look away. Lyra studied him even more carefully now, almost as if she was searching for fear in his eyes. Then she said something that shocked everyone in the room. "Human, do not be afraid." The soldiers immediately exchanged confused looks. The words made no sense. Why would the most feared commander in the Empire tell a prisoner not to fear her? Daniel himself looked slightly confused, but he did not speak. His heart was beating faster now, yet he tried to keep his face calm. Lyra slowly stepped down from the raised platform where she had been standing. Her armor made a quiet sound with every step across the metal floor. She stopped only a few feet away from the human pilot. Looking down at him thoughtfully, the soldiers expected her to question him about Earth's defenses or human military strategy, but she remained silent again for a moment. Then something even more shocking happened. Lyra raised her hand and turned toward the soldiers standing along the walls. Her voice became sharp and commanding. "Leave the chamber." For a moment, nobody moved. The order sounded impossible. No commander in the Empire would ever dismiss their entire guard while standing near a prisoner. One officer finally stepped forward and spoke carefully. "Commander Lyra, this human could be dangerous." Lyra's glowing eyes shifted toward the officer, and her expression became cold. "I gave an order," she said calmly. "All soldiers leave the chamber immediately." The authority in her voice was absolute. One by one, the soldiers obeyed, though many of them looked deeply confused. Heavy doors opened again, and the armored warriors slowly marched out of the room until the large chamber became silent and empty. Soon only two figures remained inside the enormous hall: Commander Lyra and the human prisoner. Daniel noticed something strange then. The powerful alien warrior who had defeated entire fleets had just sent away every guard she had. She was standing completely alone in front of a captive human. For the first time since entering the chamber, Daniel spoke quietly. "You just sent your entire army away." Lyra looked at him calmly and replied, "Yes." Daniel frowned slightly, trying to understand her decision. "Why would you do that?" he asked carefully. Lyra studied him again, as if his reaction was important. Then she gave a small, mysterious smile. "Because humans behave differently when they are not surrounded by soldiers," she said softly. Daniel stared at her, realizing something was very strange about this situation. He had expected interrogation, torture, or execution. But this alien commander seemed interested in something else entirely. And in that silent chamber, floating in deep space, Daniel slowly began to understand that his capture might be part of something far bigger than he imagined. Before the conversation continues, if you enjoy stories like this and want to see more human courage and sci-fi adventures, gently consider subscribing to this channel so you never miss the next story. Commander Lyra then looked directly into Daniel's eyes again and said something that made the moment even more mysterious. "Human, tell me something honestly." Daniel waited silently. Lyra's voice became calm but serious. "Why are humans not afraid to stand against an entire galaxy?" The enormous chamber of the alien warship remained silent after the last soldier left. The heavy doors had closed, and now only two beings stood inside the vast metallic hall: Commander Lyra, the most feared warrior in the Empire, and Daniel Carter, a captured human pilot from Earth. The distance between them was only a few steps, yet it felt like an entire galaxy of uncertainty stood between them. Daniel slowly rose from his knees as the energy restraints around his wrists hummed softly. He was still a prisoner, but the situation no longer felt like a normal interrogation. Something about the alien commander's calm behavior made the moment feel strange and unpredictable. Lyra stood still for a moment, studying the human carefully, as if she was trying to read thoughts hidden deep inside his mind. Her glowing eyes reflected the dim blue lights of the chamber, and her silver armor made her look almost like a living statue, powerful and perfectly controlled. Daniel had heard rumors about alien commanders during training back on Earth, but none of those stories had prepared him for the quiet intensity of the woman standing before him now. "You asked a question," Daniel finally said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, though he could feel the tension inside his chest. "Why humans are not afraid to stand against the galaxy?" Lyra nodded slightly. Her expression remained neutral, but her attention never moved away from him. "Yes," she replied softly. "I want the truth." Daniel let out a slow breath. Thinking carefully before answering, "Humans are afraid," he said honestly. "We feel fear, just like every other species." Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly as she listened, clearly interested in every word. "But fear does not always stop us," Daniel continued. "Sometimes it pushes us forward." For a brief moment, Lyra remained silent again, absorbing his answer as if it was more important than any battle report or military data she had ever studied. Finally, she turned away and began walking slowly across the chamber floor. Her steps echoed softly against the metal walls. Daniel watched her carefully, unsure whether he had given the right answer or made a dangerous mistake. "You are different from what the Empire believes," Lyra said after a moment. Her voice echoed slightly in the massive room. "Our records describe humans as chaotic, emotional, and weak." Daniel allowed himself a small smile. "We are emotional," he admitted, "but weak is not the same thing." Lyra stopped walking and turned back toward him again. Her glowing eyes held a strange curiosity now. Not hostility, not anger, but something closer to interest. "That is exactly the mystery," she said quietly. "Your species is physically smaller than most warriors in this galaxy. Your ships are not the most powerful. Your technology is not the most advanced." She stepped closer again, stopping only a few feet away from him. "And yet humans continue to survive." Daniel shrugged slightly. "We are stubborn," he replied. For the first time, the corner of Lyra's mouth lifted in a faint smile, as if the answer amused her. But the smile disappeared quickly, replaced again by the serious focus of a commander who had spent her entire life studying war and strategy. "You see," Lyra continued, "the Empire is preparing something very important." Daniel's body stiffened slightly. He already knew what she meant before she finished the sentence. "An invasion of Earth," she said calmly. The words hung in the air like a silent explosion. Daniel felt a cold weight settle in his chest. He had feared this possibility ever since his capture. but hearing it spoken so clearly made the danger feel real in a new and terrifying way. Our leaders believe humans will fall quickly, Lyra continued. They believe fear will break your people the moment our fleets appear in your skies. Daniel remained silent, his jaw tightening slightly. But I disagree, Lyra said. Daniel looked up at her again, surprised. Lyra's glowing eyes studied him with sharp attention. I have fought many species during my campaigns, she explained slowly. Most warriors fight only when victory is certain. When they believe defeat is coming, they surrender, retreat, or beg for mercy. She paused for a moment before continuing. Humans do something different. Daniel waited, unsure where the conversation was going. You fight even when defeat is certain, Lyra said quietly. Daniel thought about the long history of Earth, about the wars, the sacrifices, and the countless moments where ordinary people stood against impossible odds. Sometimes, he said simply. Lyra nodded once, as if confirming a theory she had been considering for a long time. That is why I captured you, she revealed. Daniel blinked in surprise. You captured me on purpose. Yes, Lyra replied without hesitation. Your ship entered the outer patrol zone of my fleet. I could have destroyed it immediately, but I chose not to. Daniel felt a strange chill run through him. Realizing that his capture had not been random made the situation even more dangerous. You wanted to study a human, he said slowly. Correct, Lyra answered. Daniel frowned. You captured a pilot just to ask questions. Lyra shook her head slightly. Not only questions. Daniel suddenly felt a deeper tension forming in the room. Something about her tone suggested that the conversation was moving towards something far more serious. Lyra walked past him slowly and stopped near one of the tall observation windows of the chamber. Outside the glass, endless stars stretched across the darkness of space, along with the massive shadow of her fleet drifting silently nearby, dozens of warships waiting for orders. The Empire believes fear controls every species, she said quietly while looking out the stars, but humans appear to be different. Daniel watched her carefully. And if I am correct, Lyra continued, turning back toward him, then humanity may become the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Daniel crossed his arms slightly, unsure if that was meant as praise or warning. That depends on what the galaxy does to us, he said. Lyra studied him again, her expression thoughtful. Which is why I need proof, she said finally. Daniel felt a sudden sense of unease. Proof of what? He asked. Lyra's voice became calm, but serious again. Proof that humans truly deserve to survive what is coming. Daniel stared at her in confusion. And then Commander Lyra spoke the words that made the entire situation far more dangerous than he had imagined. You are going to help me test humanity, she said quietly, starting tomorrow. The silent chamber of the alien warship suddenly felt colder after Commander Lyra spoke those words. Daniel Carter remained standing in front of her, trying to understand what she truly meant. The idea that a single captured human pilot could somehow test humanity sounded impossible, yet nothing about this strange situation had been normal from the beginning. Lyra slowly walked back toward the center of the chamber, her silver armor reflecting the faint blue lights around the room. Her calm movements made it clear that she had already thought about this plan long before Daniel's ship had ever appeared near her fleet. Daniel finally spoke, his voice careful but firm. You said the Empire is planning to invade Earth, he said, and now you want to test humanity through me. Lyra nodded once, her glowing eyes watching him closely. Yes, she replied calmly, because the Empire believes humans are weak. Daniel gave a short, dry laugh. You captured the wrong human if you think one pilot can represent an entire planet. Lyra did not react with anger. Instead, she looked almost thoughtful, as if his answer confirmed something she had already expected. Perhaps, she said quietly, but sometimes a single moment reveals more truth than 1,000 reports. Daniel frowned slightly, unsure whether he liked the direction of this conversation. What kind of test are we talking about? He asked. Lyra remained silent for a few seconds before answering, as if she wanted the tension of the moment to settle deeply into the room. Then she raised one hand and pressed a small control device on her armored wrist. Instantly, the far wall of the chamber lit up with a massive holographic projection. A detailed map of the galaxy appeared in the air, stars and planets glowing like distant fireflies in the darkness. Daniel stepped a little closer, studying the projection carefully. Several large regions of space were marked with the symbol of the alien empire. Their territory stretched across hundreds of systems, far larger than anything humanity had ever controlled. "You see this," Lyra said calmly while pointing at the glowing map. "This is the empire you stand inside right now." Daniel swallowed slowly. The scale of it was intimidating. "Our military leaders believe humans will surrender the moment they see the size of our forces," Lyra continued. "They believe fear will destroy your resistance before the war even begins." Daniel crossed his arms slightly, trying not to show how much the projection worried him. "But you are not convinced," he said. Lyra turned toward him again, her glowing eyes sharp with focus. "No," she said quietly, "because humans continue fighting even when defeat is likely." She paused for a moment before continuing. "And that makes your species unpredictable." Daniel raised an eyebrow slightly. "You're worried about unpredictability?" Lyra nodded once. "In war, the most dangerous enemy is the one who refuses to behave logically," she explained. Daniel could not help but smile a little. "You just described humanity perfectly." For a brief moment, Lyra almost looked amused again, but the seriousness quickly returned to her face. "That is why the test must be simple," she said. Daniel waited, feeling the tension grow again. Lyra touched another control on her wrist device. The holographic map disappeared instantly, replaced by a completely different image. Daniel's eyes widened slightly when he saw what it showed. It was a massive alien arena, a circular battlefield surrounded by towering walls and thousands of seats, clearly built for huge crowds. The structure looked ancient and powerful, like a place where warriors had fought for generations. "What is this?" Daniel asked quietly. Lyra stepped closer to the projection. "This is the arena of trials," she explained. "It is where warriors from across the empire prove their strength." Daniel studied the image carefully, noticing several enormous gates around the arena floor, each gate large enough for creatures far bigger than humans. "You want me to fight in that place?" he said slowly. Lyra nodded without hesitation. "Yes." Daniel stared at her for a moment, waiting for her to admit it was a joke, but her expression remained perfectly serious. "You're serious," he said finally. "Completely," Lyra replied. Daniel shook his head slightly. "You realize most of your soldiers are twice my size." "Correct," she said calmly. "And you expect me to survive." "That depends on you," Lyra answered. Daniel laughed again, but this time the sound carried real tension. "That's not a test. That's an execution." Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly as she looked at him. "No," she said firmly, "it is a demonstration." Daniel's smile slowly disappeared. "Of what?" he asked quietly. Lyra's voice became calm but intense. "Of human courage." The words echoed softly inside the giant chamber. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, trying to process the situation. "So your empire will judge humanity based on whether one captured pilot survived the fight in your arena?" Lyra shook her head slowly. "No," she corrected him. "They will judge humanity based on how you face the fight." Daniel looked back at the holographic arena again, imagining thousands of alien spectators watching a human struggle to survive against warriors who had trained their entire lives for combat. "And if I lose?" he asked. Lyra answered without emotion. "Then the Empire will conclude that humans fear death like every other species." Daniel turned toward her again. "And Earth," he said quietly. Lyra remained silent for a moment before speaking. "The invasion will begin," she admitted. The chamber suddenly felt much heavier with that truth hanging in the air. Daniel realized the impossible position he had been placed in. His survival alone would not matter. What mattered was what the Empire believed about humanity after watching him. He took a slow breath, staring once more at the massive alien arena floating in the holographic display. "This test of yours," he said carefully, "when does it happen?" Lyra looked directly into his eyes again, her voice calm and certain. "Soon," she replied. Then she turned away from him and deactivated the projection completely. The chamber returned to its dim blue lighting once again. But before leaving the room, Commander Lyra spoke one final sentence that made Daniel realize just how dangerous the next day would be. "You will not face an ordinary warrior," she said quietly. Daniel felt a cold feeling in his chest. Lyra paused near the door and looked back at him. "Your opponent," she said calmly, "has never been defeated." The next cycle on the alien warship began in silence. But Daniel Carter knew something enormous was waiting for him. The guards arrived early and escorted him through long metallic corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly through the giant vessel. The atmosphere felt different now. Soldiers who passed by slowed down to look at him. Some whispered quietly to each other. Others stared with curiosity as if they were observing a strange creature that did not belong in their world. News about the human entering the arena of trials had clearly spread across the ship. Daniel walked between the guards calmly. Even though his mind was racing, he had spent the entire night thinking about Commander Lyra's words. This test was not only about survival, it was about how he faced the impossible. The fate of Earth might depend on how one human behaved inside an alien arena. The idea sounded insane, yet it was real, and now he was being led directly toward it. After several minutes, they reached a massive transport platform deep inside the warship. A large group of soldiers was already waiting there, and among them stood Commander Lyra. Her silver armor looked even brighter under the harsh white lights of the hangar. She appeared calm and completely focused, like a commander preparing for an important military operation rather than a strange experiment involving a human pilot. When Daniel approached, the guard stepped back slightly, leaving him standing a few feet in front of her. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet tension between them felt almost heavy in the air. Finally, Lyra broke the silence. "Are you ready, human?" she asked calmly. Daniel gave a small shrug. "Ready or not, I'm still going," he replied. Lyra studied his face carefully, searching once again for fear. She could see the tension in his posture, but she also noticed something else: determination. Humans truly were strange creatures. They could feel fear deeply, yet somehow continue moving forward. Without another word, Lyra turned toward the transport platform and gestured for him to follow. Moments later, the platform began to move, descending slowly through a massive launch tunnel beneath the warship. The metallic walls vibrated softly as powerful engines activated around them. Daniel looked down through the transparent floor panel of the platform and saw something incredible far below. A colossal structure floating in space, larger than many cities he had seen on Earth. Bright lights surrounded it like a glowing crown, and thousands of transport ships were already gathering around its outer ring. The arena of trials. As the platform continued descending, the true scale of the arena became clearer. Giant metal walls surrounded the circular battlefield, and enormous towers rose high above the central combat floor. Each tower held massive viewing platforms filled with alien spectators from many different species. Some were tall and armored like Lyra's soldiers. Others were large creatures with thick skin and glowing markings across their bodies. The entire galaxy seemed to have gathered to watch this event. Daniel felt his stomach tighten slightly, not because of fear alone, but because of the pressure of the moment. He was not just fighting for himself. He was fighting under the eyes of thousands of alien warriors who believed humans were weak. The platform finally landed inside one of the giant entrance gates beneath the arena stands. The moment Daniel stepped off the transport platform, he heard the distant roar of the crowd above, thousands of voices echoing through the metal structure like distant thunder. A group of armored guards began escorting him through a long corridor leading toward the arena floor. The corridor walls were covered with ancient markings and battle symbols, showing the long history of warriors who had fought there before him. As they walked, Daniel noticed another massive gate across the arena corridor. On the other side of that gate stood the opponent Lyra had mentioned, the undefeated warrior. The heavy gate slowly began to open with a loud, grinding sound, and what stepped forward made Daniel realize just how serious this challenge truly was. The creature was enormous, easily twice Daniel's height. Its thick, armored skin looked almost like stone, and powerful muscles moved beneath its dark scales with every step. Two glowing eyes burned like fire under a heavy bone crest above its head. The warrior carried no weapon, because it clearly did not need one. Its claws alone looked capable of tearing through metal. Several alien soldiers bowed respectfully as the giant warrior entered the arena preparation area. Daniel glanced at the guards beside him. "Let me guess," he said quietly. "That's my opponent." One guard nodded once, his voice low. "Champion Kravith." Daniel repeated the name slowly in his mind. Kravith, the undefeated warrior of the Empire. The creature turned its massive head toward Daniel and stared down at him with clear curiosity. The difference in size between them looked almost ridiculous. A small human pilot standing against a legendary alien champion. Above them, the arena gates began opening, allowing the sound of the massive crowd to pour inside like a storm of noise. Thousands of spectators were already watching the battlefield, waiting for the fight to begin. Daniel rolled his shoulders slightly, tried to loosen the tension in his body. He had no armor, no weapon, and no real chance of winning against a creature that had never been defeated. But then he remembered Lyra's words from the night before. This test was not about victory. It was about how a human faced the impossible. Daniel stepped forward toward the arena entrance, ignoring the surprised looks from several nearby soldiers. Above them, the enormous arena doors finally opened completely, revealing the bright battlefield surrounded by thousands of alien spectators. Commander Lyra stood on one of the highest observation platforms above the arena floor, watching silently as the small human walked toward the center of the battlefield. Far below her, the giant warrior Kravith stepped forward as well, its heavy footsteps shaking the metal floor beneath it. The crowd suddenly became quieter, sensing that something unusual was about to happen. A human had entered the arena of trials, and the undefeated champion was about to face the smallest opponent he had ever fought. But as Daniel walked into the center of the massive arena, something strange caught Kravith's attention. The human was not running. The human was not begging. The human was simply walking forward calmly, as if the giant monster in front of him was not the most dangerous warrior in the Empire, but just another obstacle he intended to face. High above the arena, Commander Lyra watched carefully, because this moment would reveal the truth about humanity. The massive arena fell into a strange silence as the human and the giant warrior stood facing each other on the battlefield. Thousands of alien spectators filled the towering stands above, their glowing eyes fixed on the small figure standing at the center of the arena floor. For many of them, this moment looked almost ridiculous. A human, thin and unarmored, standing before Champion Kravith, the undefeated warrior of the Empire. The difference between them was overwhelming. Kravith's towering body looked like a living fortress of muscle and armored scales, while Daniel Carter looked like nothing more than a fragile creature that had wandered into the wrong place. High above the arena, Commander Lyra stood silently on the observation platform reserved for Imperial officers. Her glowing eyes remained locked on the battlefield below. She ignored the quiet whispers of other commanders around her, because this moment was not about entertainment. It was about understanding the strange species called humanity. A deep metallic sound echoed through the arena as the battle signal activated. The fight had begun. Champion Kravith moved first. The giant warrior stepped forward slowly, its heavy footsteps shaking the arena floor with each step. Its glowing eyes studied the human carefully, almost with curiosity rather than anger. Kravith had fought hundreds of battles in this arena, but never against a creature so small and strange. Daniel stood still for a moment, watching the enormous warrior approach. His heart was beating hard inside his chest, and every instinct in his body was screaming that this fight was impossible. One strike from that creature could easily end his life. Yet despite the fear inside him, Daniel forced himself to remain calm. He remembered something his old training instructor had once said during a survival course on Earth. Fear is normal, but panic is a choice. Kravith finally stopped only a few steps away from him. The giant warrior slowly lowered its massive head, examining the human like a scientist studying a rare animal. The arena crowd watched quietly, expecting the fight to end quickly. Then Kravith attacked. The enormous claw swung downward with terrifying speed, powerful enough to crush bone and metal. The crowd gasped as the strike came down toward the human. But Daniel moved at the last possible second. Throwing himself sideways across the arena floor, the claw slammed into the ground with a thunderous impact, sending pieces of metal flying into the air. The crowd reacted immediately, surprised that the human had survived even the first attack. Daniel rolled quickly and pushed himself back to his feet, breathing hard but still focused. He knew he could not match the alien warrior in strength. That would be suicide. Instead, he relied on something else. Speed, timing, and stubborn determination. Kravith turned slowly, clearly surprised that the human had avoided the strike. The giant warrior let out a deep growling sound, almost like a challenge. Then the second attack came, even faster than the first. Daniel ducked under the massive arm and ran past the giant creature, forcing Kravith to turn around again. The difference in size suddenly became less of a disadvantage and more of an opportunity. The human moved quickly across the arena floor, never standing still long enough for the giant warrior to land a clean hit. The crowd began reacting with louder voices now. Some spectators laughed at the strange fight, believing the human was simply delaying the inevitable. But others watched with growing curiosity, because the small creature refused to surrender. Above the arena, one of the Imperial officers spoke quietly to Lyra. "This is pointless," the officer said. "The human cannot win." Lyra did not look away from the battlefield. "This was never about winning," she replied calmly. Below them, the fight continued. Kravith became more aggressive now, its powerful body moving faster across the arena as it tried to trap the human. One heavy strike finally connected with Daniel's shoulder, throwing him across the metal floor with brutal force. The crowd gasped again as the human slammed into the ground and slid several meters before stopping. For a moment, Daniel did not move. The pain exploded through his body like fire. His vision blurred slightly, and every muscle screamed in protest. The strike had been strong enough to break bones in many warriors. High above, several spectators assumed the fight was over. Kravith slowly walked toward the fallen human, ready to finish the battle. But then something unexpected happened. Daniel moved, slowly, painfully, but clearly alive. He pushed himself up onto one knee, breathing heavily as he forced his body to stand again. The entire arena seemed to notice the moment at once. The human was still fighting, even after taking a direct hit from the Empire's strongest champion. Kravith stopped walking for a moment, watching the human rise again with visible curiosity. The giant warrior tilted its head slightly, almost as if trying to understand the strange determination in front of it. Daniel wiped a small line of blood from his lip and looked back at the towering creature. "You hit hard," he muttered under his breath. Then he stepped forward again. The arena crowd began reacting more loudly now because something about the fight had changed. This was no longer just a quick execution. This was a demonstration of something different, something strange, something human. Above the arena, Commander Lyra finally spoke quietly, almost to herself. "This," she said softly, "this is the truth about humanity." Down below, the giant warrior Kravith prepared for another devastating attack. But this time the creature was no longer looking at Daniel with simple confidence. Now, it was watching the human with something far more unusual: respect. The arena remained alive with tension long after Daniel Carter forced himself back on his feet. The crowd that had once laughed at the small human now watched in complete focus, because something unusual had happened in the arena of trials. A creature that should have been defeated within seconds was still standing against the Empire's undefeated champion. Every alien spectator understood how rare that was. Daniel's shoulder burned with pain where Kravith's strike had thrown him across the metal floor. His breathing was heavier now, and every movement felt slower than before. But his eyes remained locked on the giant warrior in front of him. He knew the truth of the situation. He could not defeat Kravith, The alien was simply too strong, too large, too experienced in battle. But victory had never been the goal. The goal was something far more difficult: to show the galaxy that humans did not surrender to fear. Across the arena floor, Champion Kravith watched the human carefully. The giant warrior's breathing was steady and controlled, but its glowing eyes now held a new awareness. The creature had fought warriors from dozens of powerful species, and most of them broke when the battle turned against them. They begged for mercy or tried to escape the arena. The human had done neither. Kravith let out a deep rumbling growl, a sound that echoed across the battlefield like distant thunder. Then the giant warrior raised its arm again and charged forward with terrifying speed. The crowd leaned forward as the enormous body rushed toward the injured human. The metal floor trembled under the creature's weight, and many spectators believed this would finally be the moment the fight ended. Daniel braced himself, forcing his tired body to move one more time. He stepped aside as the giant claw swung down again, barely avoiding the strike. The ground shattered where the attack landed, sparks flying across the arena floor. But this time Daniel did not run far. Instead, he stayed close to the giant warrior, using its own size against it, moving quickly around its massive arms where Kravith could not easily strike again. The crowd reacted with surprised voices because the human was not only surviving, he was thinking, adapting, learning during the battle. Above the arena, Commander Lyra watched with intense focus. Her arms were crossed calmly, but her glowing eyes followed every movement on the battlefield below. One of the Imperial officers beside her spoke again, his voice filled with frustration. "This spectacle has gone on long enough," the officer said. "The human should have been eliminated already." Lyra finally turned her head slightly toward him. "Observe carefully," she replied quietly. "You are witnessing something the Empire has never truly understood." Below them, the battle continued. Kravith spun around again, its heavy tail striking across the battlefield in a wide arc. The attack caught Daniel in the side and sent him crashing onto the arena floor once more. The impact forced the air from his lungs, and for a moment, everything around him felt distant and quiet. The arena lights blurred above him as he struggled to breathe. His body screamed with pain now, far worse than before. High above the arena, many spectators believed the fight had finally reached its end. Even Kravith slowly approached the fallen human again, its massive shadow stretching across the arena floor. Daniel's vision slowly cleared, and he saw the giant warrior standing over him like a mountain, ready to deliver the final strike. For a brief moment, he thought about Earth, about the small blue planet far away among the stars, about the billions of people living their ordinary lives without knowing how close danger might be, and something inside him refused to accept that this was the end. With a deep, painful breath, Daniel forced his hands against the floor and began pushing himself upward again. The movement was slow and difficult, but it was unmistakable. The human was standing up again. A wave of astonished voices spread across the arena stands, because no one expected the human to continue fighting after such punishment. Even Kravith paused again, watching the stubborn creature rise once more. Daniel finally stood, swaying slightly but still facing the giant warrior. His body was bruised and exhausted, yet his eyes still held the same determination as before. Above the arena, the Imperial officers had grown silent. The scene below was no longer entertaining. It was becoming uncomfortable, because the human was proving something the Empire did not want to admit. Fear did not control him. Commander Lyra spoke quietly then, her voice calm, but clear enough for the officers around her to hear. "This is why I warned you," she said softly. The officers looked toward her with confusion. Lyra returned her attention to the battlefield, where Daniel still stood against the giant champion. "Humans are not fearless," she continued, "but they refuse to stop." At that moment, a loud signal suddenly echoed through the arena, interrupting the battle. Every soldier and officer in the stands immediately turned toward the highest command platform above the arena, because new figures had just arrived there. The leaders of the Empire. The High Council had come to witness the result of the test themselves. Below on the battlefield, Kravith slowly stepped back, recognizing the signal that commanded warriors to pause. Daniel looked upward toward the towering command platform, where several powerful alien leaders now stood beside Commander Lyra. Their glowing eyes were focused directly on him, judging humanity, and the decision they were about to make could determine the future of Earth itself. The entire arena had fallen into a deep and uneasy silence after the arrival of the High Council. Thousands of alien spectators who had once shouted and laughed during the battle were now quiet, because everyone understood that this moment was no longer just a fight. It had become a judgment, not only of the humans standing on a battlefield, but of the entire species he represented. Daniel Carter stood in the center of the arena, breathing heavily while trying to keep himself balanced. His body ached from the powerful blows he had taken, and every muscle felt exhausted. Yet he remained standing, facing the enormous warrior Kravith who towered over him like a living mountain. Above them, the High Council of the Empire stepped forward onto the command platform. Their tall, armored forms were decorated with symbols of authority that represented countless conquered star systems. The leader of the council slowly looked down at the battlefield, his glowing eyes studying the small human with cold calculation. "So this is the creature you risked our honor for," the council leader said, his voice echoing through the arena speakers. The crowd listened carefully, because every word from the High Council carried the weight of the Empire's power. Commander Lyra stood calmly beside the council leaders, her expression unreadable. "Yes," she replied simply. The council leader studied the injured human again, then glanced toward the giant champion standing nearby. "And yet the creature still lives," he said with quiet irritation. Kravith remained silent, standing like an ancient statue of war. The giant warrior had already understood something the council had not yet realized. The human strength was not physical power. It was something far stranger. The council leader turned fully toward Lyra now. "You were ordered to study humanity, not defend it," he said sharply. "This demonstration has already lasted longer than necessary." The other council members nodded in agreement. Their decision had clearly already been made. "End this experiment," the leader commanded. "Execute the human, and begin preparations for the invasion of Earth." A heavy tension filled the arena the moment those words echoed across the battlefield. Daniel heard them clearly, and for a brief second he felt the cold reality of the situation press down on him like the weight of an entire planet. Everything he had endured in the arena suddenly seemed small compared to what those words meant. Earth would burn, billions of people would suffer, and nothing he had done would matter. Kravith slowly turned its massive head toward Daniel again, waiting for the final order to strike. But before the giant warrior could move, another voice suddenly interrupted the silence. "Wait!" The voice belonged to Commander Lyra. The entire arena shifted with surprise as she stepped forward onto the edge of the command platform, her silver armor shining under the bright lights above the battlefield. The council leader looked at her sharply. "You challenge our decision?" he asked coldly. Lyra did not hesitate. "Yes," she said calmly. A wave of shocked whispers spread through the officers and soldiers watching from the stands, because challenging the High Council was something almost no commander dared to do. The council leader's voice became colder. "Explain yourself," he demanded. Lyra stepped forward another step and gestured toward the battlefield below. "Observe the human," she said quietly. The council leaders looked down again at Daniel, standing alone in the arena, his body injured but his posture still unbroken. "You see weakness," Lyra continued. "I see something far more dangerous." The council leader narrowed his glowing eyes. "Dangerous?" he repeated with disbelief. "Yes," Lyra said firmly, "because this species does not surrender to fear." The council leader glanced again at the battered human, then shook his head slightly. "This creature is exhausted and wounded," he said. "He will fall eventually like every other warrior." Lyra slowly shook her head. "No," she replied. "He will stand again." The council leaders watched silently as Daniel remained upright on the battlefield below, still facing Kravith despite the impossible odds. Then Lyra did something that shocked the entire arena. She turned toward the council and removed the command seal from her armored shoulder, the symbol that represented her authority as an Imperial commander. Gasps spread across the stands as she held the symbol in her hand. If the Empire believes fear is the only force that controls the galaxy, Lyra said clearly, then the Empire is already blind. The council leader's voice grew dangerously quiet. Choose your next words carefully, Commander, he warned. But Lyra was no longer speaking as a commander. She dropped the Imperial seal onto the metal floor of the platform. Then she looked directly at the council leaders and delivered the most shocking declaration anyone in the arena had ever heard. If the Empire attacks humanity, she said calmly, my fleet will stand against you. The arena exploded with shocked voices. An entire Imperial fleet choosing to defend a species that was not even part of the Empire was almost unthinkable. The council leader stared at her in disbelief. You would betray the Empire for a single human, he asked slowly. Lyra turned her gaze toward the battlefield again, where Daniel still stood facing the giant champion. Not for a single human, she replied quietly. For what he represents. Down on the battlefield, Kravith slowly lowered its massive head toward Daniel in a gesture that looked almost like respect. Because even the undefeated champion now understood something the Empire had refused to see. Humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the fastest. They were not the most powerful. But they possessed something far more dangerous than strength. The courage to stand when every reason to fall surrounded them. And as the entire arena watched the small, injured human still standing in the center of the battlefield, the High Council of the Empire realized something that had never occurred to them before. If humanity could survive fear like this, then conquering them would never be as easy as they had once believed.